There's a quad tank coming out for Orgless in Hungary to start.
Oh yeah, that's a big oof. So it makes sense, of course, why they're running the Moira. You want to have that extra healing because to heal up, keep all those 4 tanks alive, it does take a lot. And a Zen and a Lucio alone just can't really do that. But it does also mean that she's going to be really vulnerable to the Discord Orb being used against her from the enemy Zenyatta.
And immediately you saw Winston trying to dig on in for Kagasi. He will be sound waved back, and Berglund was caught out, and now Henningsen also down. Novus starting off nicely. Doesn't matter how many front lines you bring to this fight, they're saying, we'll go ahead and just take this point very quickly out of your hands. And wow, look at that, Novus setting themselves up. The big one as my big character to kind of keep an eye on, as he sometimes is a little questionable with his positioning, but so far looking solid, 56% towards the grab.
And here we go. We see kind of what I expected. Orgless and Hungary now coming out on the GOATS composition, but it does mean that they're coming in at an ultimate disadvantage because that first fight, Novus had the time to build up their ultimates, and Orgless now don't have that. They're starting from scratch for a lot of the members of this team.
What a sound wave from Kara, able to push out a couple. Berglund will fall. Henningsen drops again, and oh goodness, for Orgless and Hungary, this is starting to snowball a little bit too far out of your favor. The only person holding on to an ultimate, the only person even close to an ultimate, is Henningsen for Orgless and Hungary. Meanwhile, Novus, so many tools to play with.
They do, and one thing you need to be scared of is Eclipse having that Transcendence. And I mean, you know, it's just a Transcendence. Why should I be scared? Well, Panda brought it up at the beginning, but Eclipse really proved himself to be a fantastic support yesterday. And look, that Graviton there just taking Orgless and Hungary to their knees, to their graves, to somewhere that's not the point.
Well, I'll leave you with this one very bold stat. Nobody from Novus has fallen yet.
Oh.
You love to see that if you're a fan of Novus Ordo Seclorum. Orgless, they still have ultimates coming forward. Leodeds has to swap, though. I mean, this is right back to regular GOATs, but it comes at such a late cost, 70% already plus. The rally comes out for Orgless, looking to move on in, but met with the rally of their own. The Earthshatter! Oh my goodness, what a play! The Soundwave pushing back Henningsen, then Luff following up with an Earthshatter, but no eliminations yet. Now finally, we're starting to get some of the big one able to find one as Kagasi drops away. Tang has been forced to use the sound barrier. It will fade away, and now it just comes down to cleaning up the rest of this fight. Healthy is Novus, damage boosted is the big one. Graviton Surge just to lock this point, and this is looking to be 100-0, Gio.
It's just cruel, you're right. We're going to tick on over to that 100, and Orgless and Hungary didn't even get to see the point, and it sort of goes back to something we spoke about earlier, which is these kinds of compositions rely on that teamwork. It's not about the mechanical skill, it's about how you coordinate with one another, and when your team has only existed for literally a few days, you're just not going to be on that same page as one another, where you kind of need to, on instinct, know where you're going to be, know how someone's going to react to something, know who needs to be bubbled, who needs to be peeled for, things like this. So actually, Orgless and Hungary looking like they may come out onto well here with a non-GOATS composition, and coming out with this sort of McCree composition that we do see quite often brought out onto this point. You can get a lot of value off this. You hide behind that Orisa shield, make the rotation, be able to hold the point for a long time, but they got to actually see the point first, which they weren't allowed to last time.
yeah. Not even, you need binoculars to see it from where they were stationed up in their first round, but looking to turn the tides here, and I like this comp from Orgless. You say, okay, maybe the GOAT's not our biggest strength. We come out with something a little bit more, you know, damage-based. You know, maybe we can get some carry potential out of Berglund or Kagasi on this McCree Hanzo combination. Jumping on in is Luft on the Winston, trying to separate this Orgless team, but very nicely received and backed up. It's a little bit of a soft reset. Mini stun coming out from the flashbang, and here we go. Orgless and Hungry with the first elimination on the Luppa. Berglund falls immediately afterwards. The big one wants to get involved. Not near full charge, but the damage is still effective, and Novus will open the point in their favor. Still some eliminations to be had, but with Leodeds being demech, Orgless and Hungry will falter, and Novus will put themselves on point first.
But that was the thing. We saw Orgless, they did use more of their resource and actually get a little bit of value out of that fight, but the fight was all the way over to the side, and actually that meant that Novus kind of went, oh, all right, there's an empty point over here. We can just go and take that. And they did. And so it's these things you have to consider in a fight. It's all well and good to focus on one thing that you need to improve upon, but you have to remember the objective of the game you're even playing in the first place. And now, Novus, they're 28% onto that objective, and Orgless, they've got to win this fight to even bring it back in their favor.
The big one very close to a Graviton Surge. The swaps already happened from Orgless to go right back onto a GOAT-style composition with the Winston. First blood coming through, that's on the Kagasi. D-Max already is Leodeds. All of a sudden, this is looking like a repeat of what we saw on Ruins Discorded, but away he goes Henningsen. he'll be the only one to survive, but that is not a tale worth repeating. And I say survive, and that's only for a short amount of time as he does get staggered away. So that's going to result in another main tank not being there for Orgless, and that's going to be just a lot of free capture percentage for Novus.
Yeah, they're getting into the latter half of taking this point now. And the big one, he's still got his Graviton Surge ready to go, which Orgless are going to have to watch out for as they navigate through these narrow streets to even try and make a rotation onto the point. It could be a big risk for them that looks like the fight's going to be over in this corner. Once again, no one's touching the point, and there's the Graviton Surge.
It's coming in for the big one, able to lock in a lot of the team, and the self-destruct sequence is there as well for Moltling, and he's able to get himself a DMEC as well off the back end of it. 83% counting up. Orgless and Hungry, they're in dire straits, and things are not looking good. Luft is bouncing from rooftop to rooftop, and he will just zone everybody away. The remech will not come out, actually. Very close to doing so. Bakara able to punish 94%. And we are in a spot right now where Novus will likely secure up the Ilios 2-0 in just a small moment. Yep, and no one's going to be able to touch in time. It was close, but Novus, they go up 1-0 and a very clean 2-0 overall on Ilios.
And Orgless switched things up right at the end there to move on to the sort of composition we see where a team really wants to be trying to reach the point fast, but of course that Wrecking Ball there wasn't even able to get to the point on time. And yeah, Novus, they do manage to take 2 points without even, you know, a skin cell left from Orgless and Hungry on their precious point. They've kept it well to themselves, and it does highlight some concerns going forward into this series.
A handful of concerns, and I'm sure Panda has already got a couple of long lists worth. So Panda, bringing you back into the conversation. Again, Novus was no team to kind of shrug off, even though they started 0-1, and we're seeing exactly why here, aren't we?
There's one person in particular that's making the biggest difference out of their performance yesterday to all the way to today. We actually have to remember there's one thing that happened for Novus yesterday. They faced OMG, a very well-suited team, a veteran team at that, and they really took it to them. And we're getting to see all their strengths in why in this matchup here today. And I think the big one is definitely having a hell of a game compared to where he was yesterday. And this is the big one in the Zarya play that you want to see from that role, right? I mean, landing proper projected barriers, allowing dives to come through more or less on well, so that setting up Luft on that Winston, just pushing everybody back. Even if you get eliminated, you have pushed back the composition from the Orisa, McCree, and Hanzo into a very mini-pack dark corner that they can't get out of, because they're just going to get out DPS eventually from the Zenyatta. They also only had, Orgless and Hungry only had the Lucio and the Zenyatta without the Brigitte. That's not a lot of healing going across the board for when the Tesla cannon actually comes through. It's not a tickle cannon at that point. It's actually electrocuting you, and you have to be careful of that. But all the way back from Ruins to well, we're seeing a continuation, a very reprised statement coming through from Orgless so far, that they're rolling out with these flexibility compositions and then switching over to the mirror, whether that is goats or the monkey goats at that, which we saw on well. It's just a little bit too late to the party. At that point, the big one already has so much charge left over inside of his gun, and he is just going to be saving up all of that and then winning fights off a Graviton Surge, setting up the next fight and the previous two for having a 5 bank of ultimates continuously. That's the well-oiled machine of Novus that we saw through Open Division.
Yeah, I have to completely agree with you. I think a lot of it does come down to the Zaryas. Yesterday, we saw the big one get a lot of value out of playing Zarya. He was a little bit inconsistent at times, but when he was good, he was really good. But when we looked at Berglund, I mean, there was a point yesterday in Orgless and Hungry's series against Young and Beautiful. I don't remember which map it was on, but basically the win condition was he had to get this Graviton Surge. And he threw it straight into Danny's defense matrix, and it wasn't even Danny got it and it was super smart. It was he threw it straight into Danny's defense matrix. And yeah, it's true, when you're playing these kinds of compositions, your Zarya has to be really on point, because a lot of the value of the composition is going to come from the Zarya. The bubbles, the Graviton Surges, the how high charge you are, everything like that. And it is true, it's pretty undeniable, even in just from this first map, that the big one is getting so much more than Berglund is.
Novus undeniable so far. We'll head to Kings Row, though, for the hybrid just after this. Again, Novus and Orgless both looking for their first win. Stick with us as we come back just after this break. Welcome back, everybody. I hold shift with Geo. We've got King's Row. This should look pretty familiar for you, Geo, I'm sure.
Yeah, every time I step out of my flat, this is all I see. In fact, the image of seeing a Mondata get shot like runs over and over in my head every time I walk around in London. No, yeah, you're absolutely right. There's nothing factually wrong about that statement.
You know, I just try to get you, you know, a little bit more immersed in your real life situation. I know how much you love the Overwatch thing. So
Thanks
I
for the
figured
emotional support.
Anytime, it's okay. We can get there together. I'm sure that's why Leg Day appreciates you so much. So now we go back in. We've got Orgless and Hungry. They'll be represented in the red and starting things off on attack first. Berglund will look for an opening pick. And for the side of Novus, they're going out the gate with, of course, what you would anticipate a pretty standard goats.
Yeah, which is, I mean, kind of interesting because I'm a really big fan of the fact that on King's Row you can come out with things that are more creative, and you do frequently see that. So, you know, yeah, okay, 3-3, let's see how it goes, but that's kind of how I feel about it. But that said, we have seen it played very, very well in the past. Orgless and Hungry, at the very least, not coming out with a quad tank. They're actually sticking with this composition and being able to build up ultimates.
And a very scrappy brawl right around the Omnic statue that does favor Orgless and Hungry. Eclipse, oh my goodness, we haven't said his name much today, but how about that? Able to find some orbs of destruction. And one more, find yourself 3, big fella, why not? We talked about him being the support prodigy out of EU, and you're seeing exactly why early on.
I mean, Eclipse, we have to shout him out because he really is a prodigy. That's like the right word to use about him. He's 16 years old. He played in the World Cup for Team Austria. He stood out there, and you've seen him on Zenyatta. We haven't even seen his Ana yet, but he's really holding up for this team and providing amazing value. I mean, say it for a number of people, but just keep an eye on him.
Lucked already with an Earth Shatter. Speaking of things to keep an eye on, there's only one with an ultimate, and he'll drop it. It finds a lot of the front line. Henningsen melted away like butter on a hot day. And goodness gracious, Kara as well getting himself involved. It just comes down to finding Wadio before he can get himself back into spawn. Orgless and Hungry denied immediately again.
You know, once again, it comes back to the same thing that we saw in Ilios, where Novus are just pushing them back to the spawn, which especially we don't see loads of on this map. We frequently don't see a team pass through that choke point there, and often you see a lot of aggression come in as an attacking team starts to make their way onto this point, but Orgless have actually got to make their way onto the point first.
Indeed, and the big one, he's got a Graviton Surge. We'll throw it right into the shield of the Reinhardt, but it will still soak up a couple of players, but they lose Luff. Self-destruct doesn't find enough. Transcendence also into play for both teams. 6 on 5, favoring that of Orgless. Sound Barrier will try to turn the tides. Oh, and goodness gracious, Henningsen, he whiffs on another Earth Shatter. You hate to see it. It was almost the point for Orgless, but turned aside off of some great support gameplay. Once again, the big one also staying near full charge the entirety of the time. Not going away yet is Orgless, and you have this reset here, I think. You don't have all players here, and all of a sudden, Luft is back into the fight, Geo, so now all of a sudden, Orgless, they do get themselves one ticket capture, but Novus is going to be able to hit this back with 6 men once again.
Yeah, and a big issue that we did see Novus kind of face in that last fight was using both of their support ultimates very close together, which means, yes, they have had to back out a little bit because they don't have that on their side. So it is looking like Orgless and Hungry may actually be able to tick this point over and get the payload rolling, because when you just don't have those support ultimates on your side, you can't expect to have the advantage in a fight, especially when the opposing team does have their sound barrier ready, which Tang has been holding on to for a little while now, but it's still there, and that's not something you want to be too cocky about.
You know, for me, though, I kind of called that the way I did simply because Orgless and Hungry, you think that they have not won an odd man situation yet, but the confidence not shook. They take that fight essentially 4v5, sit on the point, let their respawns come back in, and they play a very confident team fight, and it pays off. So now the payload starts to move through the streets phase, and the Graviton Surge will open things up for Orgless, and they find some good initiation here. The rally has also popped and turned, but now Eclipse has himself an ultimate as well. Keep an eye to see when that Transcendence pops for Novus. The self-destruct in the back line won't find anything. The Earth Shatter will at least stun up one, but there is Eclipse with that Transcendence. Responding as Orgless. No eliminations yet. Full 6 on 6. And the ultimates are starting to trade away. The big one is holding one of the last ones, and he puts it right on down the Graviton Surge good, and that will be enough for Obling to start flailing on through. Novus will hold this first defense on the streaks phase.
A final punch in the middle there, just to down who was ever left in his Graviton Surge. But yeah, it's true, there were so many ultimates that came out in that fight, and what you often like to see moving on through a payload map, an escort map here, is you like to see the snowball, where a team comes in with a lot of ultimates and they're able to use them time at a time so that they can keep the momentum going, but they were all used so much in that one fight that it ultimately came down to the last ultimate that was used was the one that decided the fight there.
And it was the big one from the big one that was able to set that up. I know, more cringe commentary from Shift. Molfig trying to get his way back in, and again, look at the spawn trap, just Novus. So much confidence. You take down the support line, you take down the Reinhardt, just go. Gas pedal all the time, full throttle, and they're absolutely punishing as that payload. Again, it's starting to recede itself backwards, even slowly here, so Orgless is just, again, the demand is just increasing minute by minute for Orgless.
It is super confident, and of course Novus, they have such good sights on every every kind of exit of the spawn, out of which Orgless and Hungry can kind of emerge, which means that they can build up this ultimate charge.
Oh, Henningsen. You hate to see it. Another Earth Shatter goes right into the shield of Luft, and now looks to be responded for Novus. The Graviton Surge also being used for Orgless. Self-destruct does find Oblink, so an opportunity, but it's going to come at the cost of Novus. Have so many game-changing ultimates. Self-destruct, corner pocket easily found underneath the archway. Molfig will pick himself up another two-piece, which we've seen so often with him playing this D.Va in combination with the rest of his other frontliners, and Novus will hold once again a minute and 20 on the clock for the rest of this push.
Again, it's just kind of the same things over and over. Orgless and Hungry must feel like they're kind of running into a brick wall, either that or a constant supply of Graviton Surges, I'm not sure, but even getting through this choke point is really hard. It's a horrible place to be stuck because it is such a narrow area into which Novus can kind of pump their damage, build up their ultimates, and then pump their ultimates, you know? But it looks like they're backing a little bit to let Orgless and Hungry take some space here and be able to move the payload a little bit and preparing for a fight.
Luft was in trouble, but a key bubble comes out, and now it's going to be Eclipse saying, let's go Transcendence, let's get forward. Graviton coming out for the big one, and that is just a lot of health bars melting in the face of the big one, who's got himself a nicely fully charged, at least he was at one point throughout the majority of that fight. Down to 30 seconds, but you take a look at what Orgless has. You've got Grav, you've got Earthshatter, both of them have to be effective.
I think they probably will. Oh, well, actually, on Orgless and Hungry, you never know. Sorry, I was looking at the Earthshatter on Novus, and I was like, no, I have faith. But yes, you're right. Orgless, they need to be working hard to make sure that they do get the value out of this. I'm not so convinced with Berglund, but you never know with Henningsen.
He was good yesterday. He's had a little bit of struggle so far early on in this set today. Graviton Surge will soak in a couple. Sound Barrier used in response for Novus. Now all of a sudden, can you turn this for Orgless? Henningsen not pulling the trigger yet. Luft will find 5. Wadio will put the Transcendence there, but the pin comes out from Luft, and they are able to find Henningsen, so no Earthshatter coming out for Orgless, and this is disaster spelled a million different directions for Orgless and Hungry. They're going to get chewed apart. Fully charged is the big one. Oh, missed opportunities. Henningsen maybe a little delayed on the trigger call. Maybe his confidence shook just a tad bit. Cleaning up the point is Orgless and Hungry, or pardon me, is Novus. And nobody from Orgless will be able to touch in time. That is what we call a streets hold for the side of Novus Ordo Seclorum.
And Novus should be feeling pretty confident as they go into their own attack, knowing that they don't have to get it very far. In fact, they only got it 70.31 meters to be exact. And even then, as you say, that was in overtime. So it's looking like it could be pretty easy for them. It doesn't even feel like they need to think too much about what they're going to run as a composition, because so far Orgless have tried a number of things and they haven't really given Novus the feeling, at least from what I can tell, that they're a massive threat on anything. They tried the quad tank earlier. In fact, they tried it yesterday as well against Young and Beautiful, and neither time did it work. They've tried this Goats. It hasn't really worked. They tried running that kind of dive or with the McCree. It hasn't really worked. So what Novus kind of have the confidence where they can sit there and they can think, well, we don't really need to worry about countering. We just know what we're good at and we'll play that because it's going to work.
Gia, I was just about to bring up the point that, again, nothing's working for Orgless. You think back to yesterday, the one thing that was starting to work was the Mei pick. So Leo Dead, you see him coming out of spawn, it will be Mei, trying to find some kind of a repeat of the success he had yesterday. But again, you take a look at what this does weakness-wise, Orgless and Hungry, no D.Va, so no defense matrix throughout this defense.
You're right. He is channeling his inner Kenzie, or at least the Kenzie that we saw in the regular season, perhaps not the Kenzie that we saw earlier. But yeah, you're right. Mei does provide not only the CC, she can use the wall, she can use her ice block. Not only does that allow her to heal, but it allows her to block off enemies, it allows her to stay on the point and keep that in contestation. But because she has no damage drop off on her ice pick, she can also be used as kind of like a sniper. And you got Luft at the top here. He will most likely switch onto that main tank role. But with Obling on the Pharah, that's going to be a little bit of a risk for him, and you could actually find that this does put some pressure on Novus, which they weren't formerly feeling. Well, Obling's not on fire anymore, Rip.
You know, it's interesting though, because there would be no one to counter him if he were to go Pharah here, because again, you're looking at a Mei with no Diva, no Moira, so there is potential for that, but it's going to be the big one. You take a look at something new and spicy. How about the Reaper? He played it yesterday, looking for an opportunity to do it here. Icewall up early, but Mei very low, Luft able to get separated though, so a nice start here for Orgless. Looking for, again, a counter to this Mei, and it looks like the Reaper will be offering that, but look at all this pressure coming up for Orgless. Coming up clean as well as the kill feed reads all red. Henningsen, you got to feel the confidence in the back end of the Mei. Hopefully we don't see a repeat. Again, one of the biggest catastrophic moments for this combination was an ice wall as soon as Henningsen was dropping the hammer, so let's hope they've cleaned that up here in the defense.
I forgot about that, and you just reminded me of it.
You're welcome.
Now I want to leave the broadcast and cry. But no, I think Novus's pick onto Reaper, even though it didn't necessarily work just in that fight just then, was actually quite smart, because he pretty much is the biggest counter to Mei. He can really get in there, but he also dragged a load of the attention onto himself, which is how Novus got pushed back then. So if they can find a way of actually being able to get around that and use him as a distraction tool, then actually Novus could probably push onto this fairly easily.
Gosh, I like that play a lot. Mei focused the left-hand side of the Omnic statue. Henningsen on the right-hand side, shatters 2, finds follow-up. Looking good for Orgless and Hungry so far, and for Novus, you're very close to having this first Death Blossom. I think you play for that. If it doesn't go well, maybe an opportunity to swap, but again, we're just getting down to that 2 minutes and change mark here.
It'll be interesting to see if he waits to use it after Leodets has used the wall, so he can't block it off. But we've also got people on Orgless who are ready to use it. Here comes the Blizzard straight into the choke point.
And Berglund, he's just going to hold on to this grab, of course. No need to use it here. Another nice ice wall, and that's going to be Luft. He does find himself one consolation elimination, but it comes at the cost of his life. And still, the big one, trying to Wraith walk away. Not going to be able to get fully into spawn. Another nice little staggered elimination. Now down to 1 minute and 45 on the clock. Novus struggling to get onto this checkpoint A.
I'll be honest, I'm kind of impressed. This is really not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be a lot more of a stomp, I suppose, and it's just clear that Mulfig on the Zarya just isn't doing as much as we would expect from the big one.
Indeed. Graviton Surge starting off for Orgless and Hungry, responded with one of their own for Novus. The big one, when do you pull the Death Blossom? There it is, he gets moved back though, and he finds absolutely nothing, and he gets mini stunned, the Shatter comes through, but is it at too late of a cost? Orgless and Hungry have got the Transcendence, they're fully HP'd up, and now it just comes down to, can they sustain this second little research? The big one has to be forced into the Wraith walk once again. He's boosted this time around, but another nice ice wall to block any incoming damage off of what was a Graviton Surge from Mulfig. Now onto the point though. Again, Novus have the respawn proximity, and they find themselves the first tick. This is still potential for a fight for Orgless, but they have to make the call of when and where it will happen. The second tick, looking for potentially the third. It will be contested onto the point, but a beautiful biotic grenade comes out of the cliff to find so many purple, and the big one now just cleaning up for the point. Novus, they will find this third tick, but it was close for a good considerable amount of time. Orgless and Hungry, they've got the defense here to still prove on the second stage.
Yeah, I was a little bit nervous for the big one through some of that, especially once he received the nano boost off of Eclipse, and straight away the wall went up, which meant he had to take that time to make the commute around the wall, not able to just kind of go in with the guns and go straight in on the Graviton Surge that had been laid out there ready for him. And it sort of meant at that point you wonder, was this a good idea to run the Reaper? But at the end of the day, it did work. And yes, you mentioned Eclipse, and he does get those massive biotic grenades. So I'll be interested to see if more of those come out as we move into this next phase of the fight.
Or Shatter, it does actually find just the sleeping Henningsen. But that's not enough for Novus to push forward. 2 minutes and 22 seconds on the clock. Keep an eye on that. The ice ball comes out. We'll actually be able to get the Graviton Surge to actually soak in about the entire team, but the ice ball blocked off a lot of the incoming damage to what was important, which was the backline. The Blizzard will zone things away. Orgless are pushing forward. Full charge is Berglund, and he finds himself up twice in the kill feed, and that will be enough for Orgless to hold on to this defense, but a lot was used there, Gio.
Yeah, it really was. And Novus, of course, backing out there as the Blizzard came out. They thought, no, we don't want to deal with this. We're not going to allow ourselves to get caught. We're going to back out and maybe change things up. Although, actually, it looks like they're going to be coming in with the same thing. So, Eclipse does have the nano boost ready to go, which is definitely going to be a big boom for the fight. But, of course, maybe he's waiting for another Death Blossom so that he can put it on the big one. But then you don't want the same thing to happen where Leodets just used the wall against them. So this is going to be mind gaming.
It's Speaking of mining games, a little shimmy and shake there for Noahs. They feigned the right side hit and they came right back onto the high ground. Now it comes down to on the point. Graviton Surge already used. The big one, he's got the blossom. He comes up and over the ice wall. He finds himself one. The boost already extended, but the big one finds himself two. And that will be enough for Noahs to push forward. Oh, it's going to be tight here. I don't even know if anyone can get back in time. There might be one more defensive hit, but it's going to have to be desperate swaps here for Orgless.
Yeah, that's why we see Leodets now switching onto that Wrecking Ball, but you're right, it is so close, and it's looking closer and closer, like they're not even going to be able to touch. I don't think they are.
Wrecking
Yeah, he just
Ball!
wasn't, he couldn't get there, but
So
he could not
close.
get there in time. And I think that was almost like a tortoise in the hare kind of story, right? It's the big one, he switched on to the Reaper and it didn't work out quite how he wanted it to for a little while, but no, he persevered, and at the end he managed to get that Death Blossom, which really was the win condition for that fight. He brought so many members down, allowed the rest of his team to clean up, and of course, as you say, they weren't able to get back to the payload in time. So I bet Panda is bursting to talk about this map, right?
You know he is. Panda, what do you got to say about
I know.
Wasn't totally high on the Reaper as much as I was sold on the Ana, and the Ana was probably the biggest reason why Novus looks really strong, and it was probably the biggest swap through their composition.